Alexander the Great, he's been whitewashed. Alright. Battle of Gaugamela? Or some shit. Look, all I know is that I'm behind on this series. Honestly, this series is lit.
Legendary campaign against Darius III of the Achaemenid Empire, the winter of 332 to 331 was the calm before the storm. During that time, the Macedonian army had what amounted to a holiday in the gentle lands adjacent to the River Nile.
Okay.
That holiday was now over, as the mountain snows thawed and the spring began. Two of the greatest armies of the age were on the march. Alexander's force was smaller, but had proven itself supreme multiple times in the realms of discipline, technology, and command. Darius's newly raised imperial army was massive, its warriors drawn from the seemingly endless reserves of his continent-spanning empire. Persia was about to face off for one last time against Macedon at the great Battle of Gaugamela in 331. Having better gear makes a big difference in the chaos of an ancient battle.
I'm not gonna lie, that sponsorship. Oh wait, no, it's just NordVPN. Never mind.
30-day money-back guarantee.
I thought they were gonna like advertise a Sheila or some shit.
Ever since his apocal triumph at Issus 2 years earlier, Alexander had been methodically reducing every potential center of resistance in the western part of the Achaemenid Empire. Syria had been secured and administered, followed by Phoenicia, Palestine, and the jewel in Persia's crown, Egypt. But as spring of 331 BC arrived, it was once more time to move on, this time into Persia's imperial heartland. The advance would be risky. Disconcerting news was even now arriving from Greece concerning Agis' revolt. All the king could feasibly do at this point, without abandoning everything he had accomplished, was to send a great fleet of 100 ships to aid any harbour supporting the Macedonian cause. Apart from that, putting down the Greek rebels would be left to Antipater and the men under his command. With that considered, Alexander again turned east, where Darius and a colossal Persian army were waiting for him. Following one final bout of administrative fine-tuning, the king marched his army to Thapsacus, a major link between Syria and Mesopotamia. He arrived between July and August, but an advance force under Hephaestion had already been present for some time, and managed to construct 2 pontoon bridges over the Euphrates ready for the army's use. As a sign of the Macedonian engineers' skill, these bridges lacked a final stretch on the far bank, preventing any enemy force from effectively using them, and this proved to be a wise precaution. Observing the invaders crossing from a safe distance was a force of 3,000 Persian cavalry outriders, commanded by one of Darius's satraps, Mazaeus. Arrian seems to imply that Mazaeus' horsemen were supposed to stop the crossing of Alexander's vastly superior army, but it is more probable that Darius simply required intelligence as to what the Macedonians were doing. There was realistically no chance for Mazaeus to prevent the crossing by himself. Having learned from previous defeats, Darius III had come up with a plan. 70 years earlier, another invasion force, famously including 10,000 Greek mercenaries, had marched directly down the east bank of the Euphrates with the aim of taking Babylon, as the Persians believed Alexander, notoriously bold as he was, would. In that previous clash, the invaders had arrived on a wide, cavalry-friendly plain known as Connexa and were stopped in their tracks. Darius hoped to repeat that feat at the same place, further relying on the blistering Mesopotamian sun and scorched earth tactics to deny the Macedonians food, fodder, and comfort. But while this cunning plan took Alexander's directness into account, it did not account for the king's unpredictability. As a lover of Hellenic works, he too was educated in Xenophon's Anabasis. Therefore, upon crossing the Euphrates, Alexander struck northeast across the Mesopotamian plain, beelining towards the other great river, Tigris. Not only did this completely derail Darius's preparations, but the cooler northern temperatures would be better for the Macedonian army. Upon seeing Alexander...
Yo, Alexander was smart, bruh. This is what I said in my Caesar reactions. I'm like, yo, like, with Alexander, you know, he was like like you could definitely like say like, yeah, he was him. Caesar, not I like Caesar was good. Like Caesar by no means was bad, but he just had a lot of luck in a lot of his stuff, to be honest. Just a lot of stuff that should have really and truly never went his way did. But Alexander, like, he really, no, he was gifted a whole ass army kingdom, but he still had to make use of it. And the feats of Alexander is mad. The only like notable feat of Caesar, and this isn't even a uniquely Caesar thing, is his freaking Fortnite level of fortifications. But that's like more accredited to his engineers, right? So that's not really a Caesar thing. I mean, still though, that's I love it whenever I see that. Whenever I watch Caesar series, like it is, I do love it. But Alexander, bro, I just like watching Alexander more. Honestly, like I do. I like Alexander Caesar. I would choose Alexander because Alexander, you actually see him using his head. Now, I did point out that the phalanx was a very OP unit, but the phalanx honestly could have been countered very easily and had some shortcomings. Yeah. So Alexander still had to make sure, like, okay, these guys are strong, but they do have their shortcomings. Caesar, and I even said this before, like the Roman soldiers were just freaking juggernauts. Like, so, yeah, you know, like a lot of Caesar's victories could be attributed to the fact that Roman soldiers were so freaking decked out with heavy armor. You know, so it makes you wonder, like again, Caesar is not bad, but his feats aren't like Alexander, bro. Like,
Does move north, Mazaeus rode hurriedly to inform his master in Babylon. To the credit of the great king and his commanders, this unexpected turn of events did not paralyze Persian preparations, and a strategic pivot was quickly made. The imperial army would move north towards Arbela and confront Alexander somewhere on the Tigris. All the while, Mazaeus would venture upriver, dispatching a tightly knit web of scouting forces to keep an eye on the Macedonian monarch. By the time Alexander got near, Darius's army would be ready and waiting. Meanwhile, Alexander himself was still crossing the arid Mesopotamian plain, capturing a few of Mazaeus' scouts in the process. It was from these captives that the Macedonians learned, somewhat vaguely, that the main Persian army had taken up a position on the Tigris and was set to throw the Macedonians back if they attempted to ford the river. Moreover, estimates of the sheer size of Darius's massive army were also obtained. If Arrian is to be believed, such speculation simply made Alexander desire a confrontation all the more rapidly. Upon finally arriving at the upper reaches of the Tigris in mid-September, the Macedonian king and his army found neither Darius nor his 100,000 plus men. Faulty or deceptive intelligence from the captured scout, it seemed. Still, deprived of his immediate fight, this did allow the Macedonians to cross to the far bank relatively easily, after which they were given a well-deserved rest before moving on. At about the same time, Darius, vaguely aware of where Alexander was, reached Arbela. The two armies,
not just that, but like his troops needed that rest. You don't want to like rush into battle after crossing a plain like that. That could honestly spell disaster. So honestly, Alexander should be quite happy that the Persian army was not there.
Now on the same side of the Tigris, were getting perilously close to one another. While Alexander continued pressing on with the river on his right and the mountains on his left, Darius managed to find a perfect replacement battlefield for the Great Plain of Cunaxa near the small village of Gaugamela. He marched his troops up and immediately set laborers to work, flattening hills, clearing rocks and trees, and employing every possible measure to make the plain as flat as possible. The great king was so distracted by this that he failed to take the low hills 3 miles west. En route, Alexander had 2 minor encounters with Persian cavalry forces under Mazaeus, but they were easily put to flight. Further prisoners taken in these engagements revealed that Darius's massive army was at Gaugamela, by that point only around 10 miles away. Further investigation.
Yo, that's crazy, bro. Yo, that's insane. 10 miles? Bro, that's like half the size of Barbados. Bruh. Whenever like, I hear these battles, right? And these people say like, oh, well, this is so and so miles. 10 miles might not seem like a lot. But, bro, living in Barbados, bruh. Living in Barbados, it makes you realize, 10 miles is a lot. I know, like, most of y'all live in these, like, big-ass cities with these, like, big-ass freeways and whatnot. So you can, like, drive so quickly, 60 miles an hour and all that shit. Bro, when you're on an island that don't really have a lot of freeways, trust me, bro. Like, I cannot explain it unless you live on an island yourself. Like, on the outside, Barbados is small, but on the inside, it's big. That's what we all say. Like it's like, it's a long way. You could go a long way, bro. So when I hear 10 miles, I'm like, wow, that's quite a bit still. Like, it's not far away, but it's still kind of like low, especially because they don't have cars. They're like walking. That's kind of what's the word I'm looking for? I have a better perspective due to the fact that I lived on the island, which is only 21 miles long, which doesn't sound like a lot until you actually sit down and you're actually inside of that island yourself. Trust me, it's a lot. Or I should say a lot more than what you think.
Uncovered the ground leveling operations and made Alexander realize that Darius didn't intend to move from his pre-selected battlefield, allowing him to encamp and give his men another substantial rest before the climactic battle. During this short lull, the Persians utilized infiltration and assassination tactics, attempting to turn the Greek soldiers against Alexander with promises of gold and other good things. One of these letters was intercepted, and the king debated reading it aloud before the Greeks to emphasize his trust in them. He was deterred from doing so by the ever-cautious Parmenion, who reasoned that avarice recognized nothing as a crime, not even the murder of a king. Instead, the letter was suppressed and the camp fortified. While most of the army recuperated in camp, Alexander assembled a strong cavalry escort and went to personally—
You know what? He had a point there. He had a— Yo, I ain't gonna lie to you, bro. Yeah, so yeah, someone would have probably just bought into that. Yeah. People would literally like unalive people for honestly anything at this point. Oh my gosh, especially what recently just happened with Charlie Kirk. Yeah, that taught me that people will literally unalive people for anything.
They scout both the battlefield terrain and Darius's army. When he crested the hill overlooking it, Peter Green suggests that the Macedonian king might have second-guessed his earlier bravado about facing the Persians so brazenly, for what he saw was an army larger even than that he had faced at Issus. More than that, it seemed far superior in armament and skill, possessing a large quantity of fearsome eastern cavalry. That night, Alexander sat awake in his tent for hours on end, analyzing the potential of each Persian unit and considering the potential damage they might inflict, along with the tactics he could use to gain victory.
Why does he have blue eyes? Alexander the Great, he's been whitewashed.
At some point, Parmenion arrived and suggested that a night attack be carried out, but Alexander stated that he would not demean victory by stealing victory like a thief. Alexander must defeat his enemies openly and honestly. But even Arian, who usually gushes with praise over the Macedonian king, found it likely that this haughty response was just a smokescreen. He believed instead that these lofty words probably indicated confidence in danger rather than vanity. Rather than the morality of victory, refusal to engage in an incredibly risky, potentially catastrophic night attack was instead simply a sound tactical decision. Pitched battles had worked wonders thus far, and so there was no need to gamble everything in the dark. This proved to be a shrewd decision indeed. While the Macedonian army was resting in preparation for the coming battle, Darius's troops, lacking a camp with fortifications, were actually drawn up in full battle order throughout the night in fear of any surprise assault by the enemy.
What?
Not only did the consequential lack of sleep exhaust the vast array of Achaemenid warriors, but waiting hour after hour with nothing to show for it demoralized the Persians greatly, sapping their spirit.
Who the? You have 100,000 niggas just standing all night? If I'm in the middle of that, I'm like, screw this shit. I'm gonna sleep on the floor.
Back in the secure Macedonian camp, Alexander at last crossed the T's and dotted the I's of his intricate battle plan, and then simply went to sleep in the early morning hours. When the sun rose above the horizon on the morning of the great Battle of Gaugamela, Alexander did not rise with it. Instead, unconcerned by the gravity of the occasion, he slept. On their own volition, the various battalions had breakfast and assembled for battle. Only when knowledge of Alexander's plan became necessary for deployment did Parmenion, probably rolling his eyes a little, go and rouse the king from his slumber. No doubt curious as to just how the king was able to sleep so soundly when the largest army ever seen was right there over the hill, Parmenion asked him. Alexander simply responded by saying that he had indeed been worried when the Persians had been retreating and laying waste to the line of march. But now that pitched battle was on the cards, by Heracles, he has done exactly what I wanted.
Oh, what is Alexander cooking? Let's see.
Not long later, Alexander and his army strode onto the Gaugamela plain in battle-ready formation. Finally, the Macedonian king and his Persian counterpart were face to face once more, and the great battle for Asia was about to begin. But this clash was not to be the walkover the Macedonians might have expected after their winter of luxury. Darius's army was so massive that its flanks extended beyond Alexander's by a significant margin, and outflanking was virtually assured. The Persian left and right wings were commanded by Bessus and Mazaeus respectively, while the great king Darius III himself was stationed in the center. On the left, Bessus commanded thousands of cavalry from his own satrapy of Bactria.
Shit, bro. You know, this makes me think, bro, like, back when kings actually used to fight battles. Today, in this stupid world that we live in, unfortunately, the leaders of each country doesn't even fight their own damn problems. Isn't that insane? It's like how do I explain this, right? A lot of leaders, or I should just say in America anyways, but everywhere else is going through a lot of problems too. But in America, like, a lot of American leaders don't even care about the people. They just engage in wars. You know what would make it at least, like, somewhat bearable? Is that the word I'm looking for? Bearable? I don't know. Manageable? I don't know. But what would make it bearable is if they actually went in the damn battlefields and actually fought their own damn wars that they keep on starting.
Sogdians and Aracosians. Additional mounted strength was drawn from the nomadic peoples beyond Persia's northern frontier, who were in military alliance with the empire, such as the Sake and Dahe Scythians fighting as cataphracts or horse archers. On the right, Mazaeus had Syrians, Mesopotamians and Medes under his leadership, flanked towards the center by Parthian and even more Sake cavalry. Tappurians, Hyrcanians, Albanians and Sacassinians from the Caucasus and the areas around the Caspian Sea formed the link between the right and center.
I was about to say, like,
the vanguard of Mazaeus' wing was composed of Armenian and Cappadocian riders. Mixed Persian infantry and Greek mercenaries formed Darius' center, together with the king's personal cavalry, immortals, and the Indian cavalry. Two more exotic units made their debut in this massive clash. First were the great king's 200 scythed chariots, somewhat experimental shock vehicles with blades on their wheels tailored to break apart the fearsome Macedonian phalanx. 100 of these chariots were drawn up just to the right of Bessus' Bactrians, and 50 each in front of the Indians and next to Mazaeus' Armenians. 15 majestic elephants accompanied the Indian contingent. All in all, the Persian army at Gaugamela consisted of between 100,000 and 150,000 troops, 30 to 40.
What the hell? 150,000 troops? This is like the population of some Caribbean countries. Bro. The population of Barbados is 280,000. This is like half the population of Barbados. Which, if you're new to the channel, that's my country. But what?
1,000 of which were cavalry. Alexander's army of around 40.
I don't think y'all understand how big that is, bro. Y'all need to just go to an island like that, be inside, and you will understand how big that shit is.
1,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry opposed
crazy.
This gargantuan force.
What the
On the
heck?
surface, its units were drawn up as they usually were. Phalanx battalions made the solid center. Parmenion and his allied Thessalian cavalry stood guard on the left, while Alexander, the companion cavalry, and the king's usual Agrianes, archer and Hypaspist strike force prepared to smash the enemy army on the right.
Wow.
But there were a few notable differences designed by the king for precisely this occasion. Both the Macedonian left and right flank guards were angled inward in order to better withstand a Persian encirclement attack. The second line of 7,000 Greek hoplite infantry was also arrayed behind the first Macedonian line with orders to turn and face any attempt at encirclement by the enemy. Hopefully, twisting the flanks as he had and deploying such a reserve would hold the Achaemenid cavalry off until the battle was won.
Imagine bringing.
Confident in his army's supreme discipline and fully prepared to exploit Darius' plan, Alexander ordered his entire line to gradually shift to the right. Simultaneously, the king personally took his right wing and began an oblique advance, as though aiming to outflank the Persian line with his numerically inferior forces. At once reacting to this unexpected maneuver, Bessus flexed his strength by stretching his cavalry even further out, always keeping outside of the Macedonians. This in turn dragged units away from the Persian center. All of a sudden, it became obvious to the Achaemenid leadership that by edging his army to the right, Alexander was attempting to move the battle away from the leveled plain, therefore rendering much of Darius' long-planned strategy null and void. Regardless of his lacking numbers, Alexander continued drifting right until he was just short of the cleared zone. Anxious to avoid fighting on the rough ground, Bessus finally committed his wing by launching a direct charge against the Macedonian right. This commitment was precisely the move Alexander had been attempting to provoke.
Okay, Alexander.
As his companion cavalry joined battle with the ferocious Sake Bactrian horse that formed Bessus' vanguard, the Macedonian king fed additional units into the fray from deeper on his flank. Naturally, Bessus responded by committing the majority of his strength with the hope of crushing Alexander and rolling up his army. As this engagement was progressing on the Macedonian right, Darius III believed that the moment had come to wipe out this troublesome invader from the west once and for all. On the other Persian flank, Mazaeus launched an overwhelming cavalry assault against the ever-stalwart Parmenion, who was, as always, desperately outnumbered. all across
As
the line,
always.
Persian scythed chariots, 200 of them, barreled forwards in an all-out rush to smash the Macedonian phalanx.
Damn!
Exercising
I can
the
only imagine that shit.
step discipline for which they were known, Alexander's phalanx battalions refused to be intimidated by these contraptions. Instead, they simply opened lanes within their ranks, into which these horse-drawn chariots sped impotently. A few casualties were inflicted by the chariots here and there, but an effective combination of Agriani javellineering, royal guard, and army grooms put an end to Darius's wild card, ripping the drivers from their vehicles and killing them.
Honestly, Darius should have kept the chariots in reserve. He did not need to play that yet. They would have been excellent to use as a reserve unit, not fresh at the start. Like, use them when Alexander's troops have been battered a bit, you know what I mean? He really misused those chariots. Like,
Alexander's right, the clash between the companion cavalry and Bessus's horse intensified still further. For the Macedonians, it was a ferocious battle against the odds, with Peter Green stating that Alexander's 1,100-strong spearmen were fighting a force 10 times its own size. Still more Persian cavalry units from the center entered the fray, attempting to dislodge these brilliant Macedonian warriors. It was then that Alexander saw his great opportunity. The singular focus on Bessus's engagement with Alexander had revealed a dangerous weakness in the Persian left center, precisely where Darius himself was positioned. The line had been frayed, and many units that would otherwise have been protecting the great king were now absent, committed to fighting against the companions. Now, leading a spearhead of his companions, hypaspists, and several unengaged phalanx units, Alexander charged Darius directly. With the raising of a great battle cry, the Macedonian king's wedge mercilessly cut into the formations surrounding his Persian counterpart. Fighting was brutal and hand-to-hand. Macedonian cavalry spears thrust forward into the faces of the Persians, and Alexander even had more than one horse killed under him. With the help of the phalangites, Alexander scythed his way closer and closer to Darius. The Persian king, who had grown increasingly uneasy ever since the battle began, is said by Curtius to have drawn his sword and prepared to defend himself. However, even with the fate of his centuries-old empire on the line, Darius's skittish nature once more got the best of him. Faced by the rampaging elites of the Macedonian army, the King of Kings turned tail and ran for his life. Witnessing the royal flight, the majority of the Persian center collapsed. This was followed by Bessus's left, which gradually began disengaging in good order. The time was now for Alexander to seize Darius and with him the crown of the Achaemenid Empire, and so the chase began. However, before the bold and triumphant king of Macedonia could ride to claim his imperial prize, an urgent message arrived from Parmenion. The situation in the rear, unaware that their monarch had been driven off the field, Musaeus and his overwhelming cavalry wing was on the verge of snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. Moreover, a stray band of Persian and Indian cavalry had drifted through a gap in the Macedonian phalanx and were ransacking the camp. Almost certainly gritting his teeth in frustration, Alexander looked back to where his loyal general required his urgent assistance, and forth where Darius was distancing himself with every passing second. After that second of hesitation, Alexander turned his troops around and charged the inner rear of the cavalry bearing down on Parmenion. Although victorious in this action also, against some of the best Parthian and Indian horsemen, over 60 of the companions were killed in the battle's hardest fighting. With the vast majority of Darius's army scattered to the four winds, and the Macedonians fully in control of the field, Parmenion rode to secure the Persian camp. The troops, meanwhile, were allowed a well-deserved rest. Alexander could hardly be too irritated that his enemy had escaped. Darius's second great army had been almost totally destroyed, his authority undermined, and the great king himself shown to be a coward unable to defend his empire. That being said, Darius had slipped the net, first to Arbela, where he regrouped with Bessus, and then further east. With the defeat of the last last of the great king's organized forces, it was now time to move east into the great expanse of the Persian Empire, where Darius was to be captured and Alexander could move on to the edge of the world. Our series on the Wars of Alexander will continue soon, so make...
Yo, I swear, I love watching Alexander series, bro. This shit is so lit. It is fire. Bro, if you made it all the way here to the end of the video, make sure you like and subscribe. Bro, I have so many active viewers on my channel. If you're an active viewer, go check out my channel membership. It's only 99 cents a month, bruh. What are you doing? It's only 99 cents a month. Only 99 cents a month. Bruh. Freaking, your suggestions are done quicker. Your comments are replied to with a lot more priority. Guys, I'm a busy person. I'm not just saying this out of my ass. Okay? I already explained to my members, like, yo, I do a lot of stuff. I don't goof off. I literally do not goof off. Like, I am literally constantly doing productive stuff, bro. This is why I always tell people, if you're an active viewer, you really want to stay in touch with this channel, you want to stay in touch with me, join the membership for the perks. I'm too lazy to explain the perks. I'm just going to link it in the comments below. But anyways, yeah, man, thank you for watching and goodbye.